From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
The Farm Bill crosses a major hurdle.
The ayes are 213, the nays are 211. The bill is passed.
But immigration reform stumbles.
On this vote, the yeas are 193 and the nays are 231. The bill is not passed.
USDA searches for financial help for tariff-impacted farmers. What weather challenges will we face this summer?
We have seen a very active northern or polar jet stream to this point.
An analysis making room for new crop.
As we start to bring the stocks-to-use ratios down, I think it creates more volatility.
AgDay, presented by the Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. A new 2018 Farm Bill takes one step closer to completion. The House narrowly passing the legislation late Thursday. By a vote of 213 to 211, the House approving its version of the Farm Bill. That bill failing back on May 18th, 198 to 213, after House GOP conservatives withheld their support over a lack of action on immigration reform. Now on Thursday, members of the House approving the bill, which includes work requirements for some food stamp recipients. That bill now waits on the Senate to vote on its version.
We're going to be able to move to a conference committee with the Senate very quickly once they pass their version. That gives me a chance and many a chance to really sit down and delve into the specifics of what the Senate bill proposes versus what we propose. There are a lot of issues in the Farm Bill that came out of the House that didn't get addressed, that I would like to see more investment in ag research, for example, that we can work with our Democrat and Republican counterparts in the Senate to address in a conference committee. This is exactly how we passed the Farm Bill in 2014, and this should be how we pass that Farm Bill in 2018 also.
The Senate is expected to take up the Farm Bill next week, the bill passing markup last Wednesday with strong bipartisan support. A divided House also struggling to pass any immigration legislation, working long into the day Thursday. The House turning down a bill, 193 to 231, drafted by Representative Bob Goodlatte, which includes changes to the H-2A guest worker program for agriculture. Tensions between the U.S. and China remain on edge following the president's request for additional tariffs on China. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer saying those wouldn't start until the U.S. picked the products and heard industry comments. That process could take months and leaves open the possibility of additional negotiations. Meanwhile, India and Turkey following China and the European Union and slapping retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. Now, last month, India's government sought an exemption from the new U.S. tariff, saying its steel and aluminum exports were small in relation to other suppliers, but its request was ignored. India then launched a formal complaint to the World Trade Organization. Among the items India is targeting, almonds, apples, and walnuts for higher import taxes. Now, Turkey's list of $266 million in tariffs will hit $1.8 billion worth of products. The proposed list from Turkey includes walnuts, almonds, tobacco, rice, whiskey, and machinery equipment. The previously announced EU retaliatory tariffs are set to go into effect Friday. Those tariffs are in response to the U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs against the EU put in place earlier in the month. Now, EU's 25% tariff targets agricultural goods like rice, cranberries, and orange juice, as well as peanut butter and whiskey. In total, the tariffs will be placed in $3.24 billion worth of exports, and this is just the start of retaliatory measures threatened from other countries.
Expecting the retaliation, it shouldn't surprise anybody. In the Carter, Reagan, George W. Bush terms, when they put tariffs on, we were retaliated against, and then tended to be more agricultural products, at least to start that way. So it's very detrimental to the Midwest.
Grassley making those comments in a Senate hearing this week where Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross was being questioned about Trump's tariffs. As those trade tensions continue, agriculture wanting to know exactly how the president plans to cushion the financial pain from tariffs. Farm Journal Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer talking to AgDay about possible aid for what he calls Trump tariff payments. He says it's an issue USDA is meeting about daily. He says through a division of USDA called Commodity Credit Corporation, or CCC, the agency can offer a financial backstop for farmers. Now, through this, CCC would purchase products like soybeans and then sell them to other agencies or donate to food aid programs. The other option tap into Section 32 funds and offer direct payments. However, Wiesmeyer says that option is murky.
It would be very difficult, and that's the complexity of this. Say, for example, a farmer who did, retrospect, but at the time it looked like a good price. When soybean futures were right around $10, they sold. Now, are they faulted by selling? Now, of course, they didn't sell all of their crops, so do they get a portion of it? See, these are the thorny issues. There's no right answers here, Tyne. They will be faulted. They would be faulted no matter what they do.
Wiesmeyer points out that it's also difficult to determine how much of the market downturn is due to China versus large crop supply expectations and other market factors. While Wiesmeyer says USDA hopes to never implement these possible plans, Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley says he feels the same.
We heard the president say that to the Secretary of Agriculture, and in the process, all the senators around the table said, we don't want money from the Treasury, we want markets.
The rate of bankers rejecting farm loans has nearly doubled this year. The just-released Rural Main Street Index showing the rejection rate at nearly 43%, up from nearly 24% a year earlier. RMI from Creighton University also points out nearly 2/3 of bankers have increased collateral requirements for farm loans. Bankers making tougher requirements due to weak farm income, and in many cases, it's due to those softer grain prices. But despite that troubling news, the overall index of the rural economy remains above growth neutral, sitting at about 56 on a scale of 100. 50 represents neutral. There's a new push this morning to reorganize the executive branch of the government, which would include taking food stamps away from USDA. The Office of Management and Budget issuing a statement Thursday that calls for a change and consolidation of several federal departments. Now, under the proposed plan, the Departments of Education and Labor will fall under one cabinet officer, calling it the Department of the Education and the Workforce. Also on the list, control of the U.S. food aid programs like SNAP would be taken from the Ag Department and placed under a rebranded agency. The current Health and Human Services Department would be called the Department of Health and Public Welfare if revamped. Any reorganization would require congressional approval and an uphill challenge in an election year. Now, the Western Corn Belt isn't the only place battling wet conditions. U.S. Drought Monitor showing most of the Corn Belt is drought-free, except for pockets in southern Iowa, Missouri, western Illinois, and an area in South Dakota. Betsy Gibbon has a mid-season crop report from the Indiana-Michigan state line.
Following a string of 90-degree days.
It's been plenty warm, so.
South Bend, Indiana farmer Randy Mathis says planting was anything but on time. His to-do list for the day includes both side dressing.
This is our first planting, I think May 4th, something like that, so.
And replanting.
Not big areas, but we are doing a little replant today, so.
And northern Indiana is not the only spot that is behind this season. Southern Michigan is too.
We are quite behind. This year we had a lot of rain. Guys are still putting a lot of soybeans in. In fact, last week there were still guys putting corn in.
Meteorologists say the precipitation will likely stick around this season.
We have seen a very active northern or polar jet stream to this point, and I don't see any signs of that breaking down over the next few weeks. Overall, I think we're going to see average to perhaps above average July precipitation for the Corn Belt. If we're going to be a little bit drier, it's probably to the west and a little bit wetter to the east.
The corn all looks pretty decent and coming out. Come out of the ground well, the stands look good. For the most part, soybeans all look really good. I mean, they just popped out of the ground pretty quick, so.
As the heat eases in northern Indiana and southern Michigan, Rippey says those temps won't be gone for long. There should be plenty of growing degree days left.
During some of these more significant heat waves that we've already seen this summer, we have been dealing with high overnight temperatures. If we get an untimely heat wave during the heart of corn reproduction, silking and beyond, that could be an issue.
As farmers like Mathis hope some heat means the rest of the crop will catch up soon.
The crop for the most part seems to be responding to the heat and growing, and I mean you can just see it changing.
Reporting for AgDay, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Excessive rain falling from the Gulf of Mexico to the western Corn Belt. Mike Hoffman has more. Today's crop comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. Here's something you don't see every day. Tom Wiebesick in Davis, South Dakota, taking a kayak out to his flooded soybean fields as rain continues to fall. Unfortunately, there's more rain in the forecast over the next few days. The rain has flooded fields in many areas as well. Justin Fastert showing a plethora of water expanding into Rock Rapids, Iowa, with more rain on the way as well. And of course, there are some dry areas also. We'll get to those in a moment, but first, here's my wind speed forecast. You can see a little bit in the southern lakes, parts of West Texas, a little bit on the windy side. Afternoon, though, eastern Rockies, much of the southeast, southern Great Lakes continues to be on the breezy side. A little bit of wind to start the day tomorrow from Texas over toward Mississippi, and then as usual during the afternoon we'll increase wind speeds, mainly Texas, the southeast, and much of the central and southern Rockies. We'll talk more about your forecast coming up. First, though, here are some hometown temps.
Keeping track of the shifting market prices has never been so easy. Get the latest commodity prices sent directly to your cell phone with market updates. Just text Markets 8 to 31313 to get started.
It may be early in the growing season, but we're talking about post-harvest decisions next at the Agribusiness Desk. And later, does your field have too much water? The experts from Corn College TV have some thoughts on managing through those challenges. Here at the Agribusiness Desk with Brian Roach, Roach Ag Marketing. All right, Brian, what happens post-harvest to those sales?
Well, we're going to end up with a fair amount of inventory that goes to the bin. Farm storage in the U.S. is as large as it's ever been.
We've added a bunch of storage.
Yeah, so we got to make room for the new crop, and we'll end up with bins full again, I'm sure. And I think that the biggest world surpluses of corn and soybeans, even if we have big crops, will still be tighter than they were over the past let's just say past 3 years.
Okay.
All right.
Sure.
And you know, Craig was talking earlier about volatility. As we start to bring the stocks-to-use ratios down, I think it creates more volatility, more opportunities for the trade to come in and buy it or sell it to create opportunities to make money. And the farmer has a friend, it's called a speculator, who wants to buy the market higher until they don't see reason to do it.
Right.
And so we'll look for that spec to come back, play a role in taking prices up to a level that the U.S. farmer wants to sell it, and we'll continue to do that. And I think that if you look out all the way out into June of 19, that we ought to have really good markets. And I'm very optimistic about markets today. This thing with China and how we're handling that is.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you thought, how that might play into this.
So one of the things of all the things that I've talked about here today in South Bend, it's been I know the least about it.
Right.
And I have the least idea of the outcome, and I know it's going to go tit for tat, and I don't think anybody can probably with any accuracy predict where it's going to go. I do think it's a big boy negotiation that at some point we both have something to lose, although the White House thinks we have a lot more to gain. So let's just hope it plays out that way. But nonetheless, we have big demand numbers in soybeans at a time when Argentina had a huge crop problem, right. 23 million ton cut in production, and we're also looking at the Brazilian crop getting smaller as we go. And I think that as you kind of go into all the way out to July of 19, that should give us some good opportunities.
All right, I like opportunities. A little good news. Appreciate it, Brian. We'll be back with more AgDay. Just a minute.
To talk to an expert one-on-one, call Roach Ag Marketing toll free at 800-622-7628.
Welcome back to AgDay. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman here looking at the drought monitor. And Mike, one thing I noticed right away is that there are some places that have gotten rains in the last week or so that maybe haven't shown up here.
Yeah, sometimes this takes a little bit while to get those factored in, but there are some spots like northeast Texas, South Texas that have gotten a decent amount of rain recently. But they've gotten a little drier on the drought monitor. So we'll have to see how things shake out next week and see how things look at that point. It's still really dry. Northern Missouri, far southern Iowa, all the way down into the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, back into the Four Corner region. Now, the Four Corner region continues to be the worst area because there have been pockets of rain in these areas from the Missouri Valley down into the southwestern plains. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, but there is no problem with drought. Northern Iowa, southern Minnesota, kind of in a big arc there into the Ohio River Valley because the rains just keep hitting the same areas. Which is unfortunate in those areas as well. Here's what 4 weeks ago looked like. So you can see how these areas have gotten drier, although like Clinton and I pointed out, There has been some rain in some of those areas just in the past few days, so we'll see how that shakes out next week in the next drought monitor. But let's take a look at the weather map today. Very slow-moving storm system, southern Illinois. We'll continue to track eastward. There's a whole bunch of just steady rain to the north of it. Showers and thunderstorms scattered through the southeast, southern Mississippi Valley. Not widespread here, but it's more widespread to the north of the system. Next system kind of coming slowly through Montana. That will spread some pockets of showers and thunderstorms along this warm front. You can see one there on our computer model. As we head into tomorrow morning, parts of Arkansas, it develops another one over parts of Oklahoma and northern Texas, which would be good news for those areas by later in the day tomorrow. This storm system finally starting to move eastward, and we're starting to see more moisture in the northern plains again with that next system. There's the past 24 hours for precipitation estimates. Adding in the next 36, you can see the majority falling from Chicago to the mid-Atlantic and then scattered through parts of the southeast. Hit and miss across the plain states. Very hot this afternoon in Texas. Much cooler in those cloudy areas, southern Great Lakes into the mid-Atlantic. Low temperatures tonight, lots of 60s across the Corn Belt, muggy 70s in the southeast. And then you can see those are pretty pleasant temperatures across most of the Corn Belt, but that is high heat and humidity in Texas. There's that cutoff low on the jet stream that finally folds into the main jet. As you can see, we get a quick little ridge over the Great Lakes early in the week, and then we kind of go zonal. It's the first time the maps look like that in a while. That's by next Friday. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. First of all, Boise, Idaho, partly sunny and a little bit warmer today, high of 86 degrees. Bartlesville, Oklahoma, partly sunny and more comfortable with a high of 84. And Clarksburg, West Virginia, clouds with showers and a thunderstorm, high of 78 degrees.
When we come back, the challenges of too much water, tips from Corn College TV, and later, is 85 degrees sweltering or a cool down? We'll make farm sense of it all coming up. There's been plenty of flooded spots in the western Corn Belt this season. Farm Journal field agronomist Ken Ferry has some thoughts on managing these environmental challenges on today's Corn College TV.
You know, we call it the bathtub ring, which means that we had ponding out in here that brought this residue up and makes it a challenge to plant into and that type of thing. But probably the bigger thing to take home is what's the area like this that stays saturated or ponding that changes how that corn's going to grow.
Okay.
So it's an environmental problem. So we come out here and we look for uniformity. We want uniform spacing, and we want growth and development from plant to plant.
Right.
Because that's things that we manage. This is an environmental situation that is probably tied to, in this case, it's tied to topography. That's a low-lying area in the field that takes a lot of water on. It's also tied to drainage. It doesn't have real good drainage. And in this case, we're also fighting high pH. So you have environmental issues that are going to slow this corn down. They're going to give it some challenges. So you start to recognize those when you use things like thermal images, yield maps, and field scouting. And for this particular grower, he knows when it's time to pull nitrates to decide how much nitrogen he's going to side dress. He's got to check that area because it's going to be quite a bit different than these areas over here that are elevated, that type of thing.
Sure, yeah.
Again, yield maps, thermal images, just flat out scouting the field and looking for those zones that get stressed early. And then remember, you got to come back here periodically throughout the growing season to see how this area is doing versus that area to get a good scouting procedure in play out here in the field itself.
We'll stick with weather and the summer sun next on Farm Sense.
In the country, brought to you by Kubota. See the all-new Commander Pro zero-turn mower at Kubota.com or visit your local Kubota dealer today.
Yesterday was the official first day of summer, the longest day of the year, but it felt like summer for a couple months now. Both May and June on track to be some of the warmest on record. Now, I always find it interesting how different parts of the country handle extreme temperatures. For instance, when I first moved to northern Indiana for AgDay, I remember a woman from the office walking in after lunch, exasperated by the heat, saying in her best northern accent, "Oh, it's so hot outside. I think my heels are sinking into the pavement." Well, it was 85 degrees outside. In Oklahoma, 85 degrees is a cool front during June. My kids, two of which were born here, react the same way to anything over 80, constantly complaining about how hot it is. Now on the flip side, in the winter, 60 degrees is shorts and flip-flop weather here, while in Oklahoma, it's a cue for my mother-in-law to start the wood stove. I guess I've learned temperatures are what you make of them, and it's pretty incredible how our bodies can adjust to the cards that we're dealt. So as we pass the halfway point of the year, I guess all I can say is stay cool and Merry Christmas. We can't control the weather, and remember, in 6 months, you'll be wishing for more days of summer. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.